Not at all. First of all, Venezuela is in our own backyard, and it's been the policy of the United States in 1803 to manage the Western Hemisphere. So that that's a cornerstone of American foreign policy. I think it is charming that Dave is defining America first in the way that he prefers, and I think there are plenty of people who wish to do that. But Dave, though a very popular podcaster, never won a presidential election, and Trump has been clear on what he means by America first, the political movement that he built, that people voted for in his coalition since the beginning. President Trump campaigned the first time around on destroying ISIS. So obviously that does not mean that America's only going to look inward. President Trump has carried out attacks, military operations that were extremely successful in Iran, in Syria, and Afghanistan, obviously in Venezuela. He's been talking about taking Greenland and even invading America's evil top hat, Canada, though I think he's mostly joking about that one, since the beginning. So that's what that means. And what it comes down to is that America is a global empire. We just are. People can be upset about that, but unless your geopolitics comes strictly from Reddit, if your geopolitics actually comes from history, you recognize that we've been an empire since the Louisiana Purchase, okay? And we've been a muscular global empire since the Second World War. So President Trump's vision, I think, actually rejects two extremes. It rejects a conservative isolationism, and it rejects a liberal internationalism, and it posits a conservative imperialism that says that we are going to recognize our role in the world, but we are going to pursue that role in limited ways with America's interest at heart. So there's been no regime change in Venezuela. We're talking about regime change in Venezuela. The regime is still in place. What we did was depose the leader. We left the vice president in place, and we said, act in a way that is appropriate in accordance with the law and our interests, or we're going to kill you. That's very different than a Bushy-era neocon regime change in Iraq. Even when we're talking about Iran, the Trump administration has not gone in a particularly overt way yet. But even there, we would be talking about a restoration of the Pahlavi regime, most likely, that goes back to 1925. So I grant there are all sorts of risks to interventions, but we're the global empire, and frankly, even the American Revolution comes out of wars of global empire. It comes out of the 7 Years' War, which itself was a derivation of the War of Austrian Succession. To pretend that we don't
Kyle
have a role in
Kulinski,
geopolitics
ChatGPT.
is to ignore all of American history.
Okay.
So another good point. I do think that you can look at it in terms of Trump's approach to all of this. Very different to the Republicans of the early 21st century, George Bush and the likes, even Clinton, all of these sort of more warmongering type administrations. I think Trump does look at that, and he has learned from it. Like, he would not want a prolonged war. He wouldn't want it for his legacy. He wouldn't want it for the financial stability of the country. Doesn't appear as though he wants that sort of thing. He wants targeted precision strikes. So it is a different thing that you are looking at here. And it's interesting when Knowles calls it this sort of conservative imperialism, recognizing your role on the world stage and how to maintain that sort of power and influence whilst not getting yourself into just 20, 30-year wars that bankrupt the country.
Kyle Kulinski, I can see you grimacing through a lot of what Michael was saying there. You said Trump says the US will run Venezuela and he threatens Colombia and Mexico. Arrest this psychotic motherfucker. Before I get you to expand on that thesis, the point I was making today.
Is Kyle Kulinski trying to be ironic with these sunglasses or something? Is he trying to dog whistle red pill creators or something like that? I don't know, but we'll see.
If I want to elaborate,
I think oftentimes when people wear the sunglasses, unless you have something wrong with your eyes, it's like a fear thing for me. You don't want people to see your eyes. You're scared.
On where I sit with this, I've had a bit of time to look at this play out, is you look at Maduro. Everyone thought, my God, this is going to be World War III. Actually, Maduro's going to end up in a New York courtroom, and he's been got rid of. Everyone seems to agree that's a good thing for not just the Venezuelan people, but the world. No American troops died in what was an incredibly efficient surgical military strike to get him out of there. And if you have a more compliant leader of Venezuela, albeit part of the same regime, that can probably only be a good thing. If you look at the argument about Greenland, for example, I've been struck by some of the people that I didn't expect to think this was a good idea. There was a British general last week talking about this, saying that from a strategic security point of view, it would make perfect sense for America to have Greenland. And is there a deal to be done? He didn't think invading it was the right thing, and nor do I. But is there a deal to be done with 60,000 people who live in Greenland that could actually improve the security of the United States and the West against the obvious threat from China and Russia and so on. And I can go through the others. Iran, getting rid of the Ayatollah and the mullahs is unquestionably a good thing for the world. It's how you do these things and whether you plan and prepare properly for what follows next that I think are the debatable points. And history says that's normally, unfortunately, been very badly done. But this is what I meant when I said to Dave that I understand the argument. I may not agree with all of it, but I do understand the logic to what Trump is doing here. Do you?
No, because we don't have a right to act like this around the world. We're supposed to be a nation among nations, not a nation above nations. And they used to at least lie to us in the past and say that this is good for the world and we're spreading freedom and democracy. Now they don't even bother to lie. Now it's naked, rank, disgusting imperialism where they say we're going to take the oil. And the point is that we're going to take the oil.
Is he wearing fucking hooped earrings? Guys, this is why you never ever go near feminist women, because you eventually start to morph into them. Like you eventually start to get the sort of dyed blonde lesbian haircut like he's got going on now, the hooped earrings, like the cringe sunglasses and stuff. Like I wonder if Crystal comes in and says, "You look super cool today, honey. You look super cool with your hooped earring." Jeez Louise.
We're going to take the minerals. We're going to take the precious metals. We're doing this for our corporations. We're doing it for the Epstein class, the billionaires. And this, to piggyback on what Dave Smith said, is frankly not what many of the MAGA voters thought they were signing up for. They thought America first actually meant America first. By the way, you also replaced the Maduro regime with the Maduro regime. Congratulations on that. It's also been now a week straight of pro-regime protests. Now you have roving gangs of Venezuelan militias that are kidnapping Americans. But again, I come back to the fundamental point, which is if you sign on to stuff like this, you're saying might makes right and the law of the jungle is back. What you're saying is China has a right to go into whatever smaller country they want and depose the leader and say we're doing it because we can and we have the right to do it and we have bigger guns and there's nothing you can do to stop it. So they're never going to address that fundamental question, which is why do we have a right? Do we actually believe in international law, or was that all a joke? Are we rolling the clock back to the 1700s and the 1800s, and we're going super primitive style here? Whoa. And I think the answer to that is yes, they want to go super primitive style.
Today's show is sponsored by the
Nuremberg Tribunal. The 20th law goes back
off with the code Piers.
Let's hear about international law, hey?
International law goes back to antiquity. It's not some creation of modernity, whether we're talking about the 1700s or the 20th century.
The Geneva Conventions, the Nuremberg Tribunal, the Geneva Conventions and the Nuremberg Tribunal?
Yes, those exist, but international laws, the jus gentium goes back to antiquity. However, unfortunately, a lot of our liberal friends think history began a few decades ago.
The League of Nations was useless. It fell apart.
Michael's got that like South Park smile he puts on.
So that's why we had a few
decades ago.
That's got to be irritating for libs to see that.
The League of Nations was useless. It fell apart, and that's why we had the UN. That's why we had the Geneva Convention.
Right, I'm talking about millennia ago,
because we looked
not
at
merely
piles of millions of dead bodies, and we said that's a bad idea. We looked at piles of millions of dead bodies and said, that's a bad idea. Let's not do that anymore. Let's actually have a framework and rules and laws. And Trump is blowing that up. By the way, he bombed fishing boats from Venezuela, Trinidad, and Tobago, and Colombia. He just did the regime change in Venezuela. He bombed Yemen and Somalia and Nigeria and Iran. He's threatening Greenland and Panama and Canada and Cuba and Mexico. And you sit there the whole time and act like it's okay. Is there anything Trump can do, Michael Knowles, that you would say, I condemn it, and you hop off the Trump train, or are you going to tickle his taint for the rest of your fucking life?
No, there have been plenty of Trump policies that I've criticized because he's only right about 99.78% of the time. So the First Step Act, I thought, was a misstep. But I would say the rest. Excuse me.
It's just so easy to get these people to bite, isn't it? It's just so easy to get them to take the bait.
I would say the rest of the administration has been very successful. What's your problem? What's
my problem
is that
you're a cuck and you're a hack and you're not an independent thinker and you're meat riding Trump.
Why do you say
that?
Know
that what he's doing in imperialism and you don't care.
I just answered your question, and I corrected
Congratulations. You rented your brain to a war criminal, pedophile, rapist. I hope you're happy.
Literally, like, this guy is meant to be one of the top dogs in terms of the leftist commentators and leftist debaters and this sort of thing. And Buddy literally sounds like something that I would hear, and it looks like something that I would see in like the mess room or in the cafeteria at a university with the first year sort of university students sitting around and talking about how bad Trump is and how bad patriarchy is and stuff. That's what it looks and sounds like.
or criminal pedophile rapist? Do you brought
Did
up
I
a
stutter?
point? You brought up international law, and you made a very false point, a dumb point, which is that international law began only a few hundred years ago. I corrected you, and I pointed out that the international law is part of the Western tradition. That, excuse me one second. It goes back to antiquity. It's a principle of the jus gentium. And then you said, well, international law has failed because of the League of Nations failure, which I think is actually undermining your argument and proving my point and proving Trump's point, because the liberal internationalism that was established by people like Woodrow Wilson did in fact fail, which is why we need to restore an older and more classical conception of the international order, which is precisely what Trump's doing. So I think you've hoisted yourself with your own petard, and then you just make a lot of vulgar sort of non sequiturs.
Chatter makes a good point here. The guy wearing the hooped earrings and is calling Knowles a cuck. The guy who looks like a sort of dysgenic lesbian is calling Knowles a cuck.
Because you don't have a leg to stand on.
All right, let me bring in...
Let me ask you this question. Hold on, Piers, let me ask him a question real quick. Tell me the name of the Minister of Defense in Venezuela.
I don't know. Whatever his name is.
Well, and that's the
Garcia
problem, is that you're
Rodriguez
advocating for a regime change. You don't know the first thing.
I didn't. I just said the opposite.
You're
I argued
advocating for
against
the
a regime
change.
Kyle,
He actually
you have to
said
get
the
cotton
opposite.
out of your-
Yeah, what a dumbass. But even so, you don't even, like, if you don't know the name of the person, then that doesn't make you wrong. If you don't know the name of the defense minister or whatever, then it doesn't make you wrong.
I heard Michael
Kyle, I
Knowles,
just want to correct
I heard
something.
Michael
You said I'm
Knowles
arguing for a
say
regime
the
change. I
regime
disagree.
remains there, right? So he said the opposite, in fact. I want to bring in Coleman.
No, but he wanted to take out Maduro. Don't give me that cutesy little
Yes,
BS.
but he
That's
made
not a
the point that the
regime favor of
regime
US
is
intervention.
still... He made the point the regime is still there, and the vice president appears to be much more compliant with running Venezuela the way America would prefer for its national security than Maduro. So that's what Michael said. He didn't advocate regime change. Let me bring in Coleman Hughes. Coleman,
Kidnapping the president is
well,
not
hang on,
regime change,
Carl.
it's
Let
an
me bring
attempt
in
at regime change.
Coleman hasn't said a word yet. Coleman, what's interesting about you, I think, with this is you've been, I think, striving to be quite nuanced with your take on all this stuff that's going on. And that's kind of where I found myself, is that sometimes taking a beat, looking at it from just a step away, and trying not to be too knee-jerk about all these things, often, A, can be beneficial to your mental health, but actually can probably better, I think, represent what is really going on here.
Coming from Piers, who, like, literally the moment that anything breaks, he's like, quickly get people to scream at each other on my show, which I like. Which I like because it's entertaining, but I mean, coming from Piers.
You know, everyone wants to go to extremes very, very quickly about everything and take a very tribal position. I've been struck by your, I think, quite intellectually honest attempt to be more nuanced. So what do you think about all this?
Thank you, Piers. I try to not think about these issues in terms of left versus right or Trump versus the opposition and try to take each issue on its own terms. So let's do that. Venezuela. If the policy here is actual regime change, in other words, not just decapitating Maduro and replacing Maduro with a second worst alternative, if we were to actually affect regime change in Venezuela, that would almost certainly be a good thing for the people of Venezuela and for American interests. Now, if we're going to do this half measure where we just decapitate Maduro and replace him with someone just as bad and then get a bunch of oil, well, that would at best be probably neutral for the Venezuelan people. It would be an enormous waste of U.S. military resources, and I would be very critical of the Trump administration. The truth is, I don't know which path we're going down, right? It's very early.
Right.
We're getting different signals from Trump depending on the day, different signals from Rubio, and anyone who's confidently prognosticating that they know which path we're going down probably doesn't know what they're talking about. As for Greenland, I think the truth is Trump is
110, 111 over there on the R side as well. I see you guys. I see the rumtards over there. I'm reading your comments too. We'll read out super chats there too.
Extraordinarily reckless in his rhetoric here. We have a situation where we have an ally in Denmark, a NATO ally. We have deep relationships with Greenland already. We have a military base. We have mineral connections. And so the idea of taking Greenland by force against the will of the people who live there is absolutely ridiculous. Now, that said, if we were to purchase it, I think that'd be a good thing. It'd have to happen with their consent. They would have to want it.
Right.
And
I think that's what will happen. I think there's chest beating going on at the moment, but the idea is that they want to buy it. The idea is not exactly that they just want to go and take it, from what I've seen anyway. The idea is that there'll be some sort of a cut price deal. I mean, yeah, an ally in Denmark in the EU. Denmark is just another EU country that is run by a bureaucracy of globalist liberals. How much of an ally really are they? Sure, you're not going to fight each other, not going to go to war with each other, but is like secular Denmark really that much of an ally? Do we have to worry that much about freaking what are the Danes going to do? They're all destroying their countries over in Europe. All of these EU heavy countries, Denmark, Belgium, France, even Italy, they're all just destroying their countries. How much do you really want to listen to people over there who have completely lost the soul of like what makes their nations great? Like the soul of Europe is Christianity. And the soul of Europe lies with the lineage and the people and the philosophers and the literature and the art and all these. That's the soul of it, the spiritual aspect of it. They've completely lost it. They're all atheist, secular, globalist pieces of shit in the EU. Like, how much do you really want to be taking advice from those people?
Would welcome them as an American.